Now back to the Soy City Buzz, presented by J.L. Hubbard Insurance and Bonds on WSOY 1340 AM and 103.3 FM, streaming live at nowdecatur.com.
Welcome back to Soy City Buzz on Monday, December, what is it, Huey?
2.
Yeah, it's December 2nd, and December 7th is coming up. And it's a very big day in our history in the United States. And I'm Kevin Haney with Gretchen Murphy. And we talk about what's up, what's right, what's happening on First Mid-Monday. And so I asked Huey Freeman, longtime reporter, how many thousands of articles at the Herald and Review do you think you've written for the Herald and Review, Huey?
Several thousand, but I will say that writing about World War II veterans was my favorite thing. And if I could have written a story every day about a World War II veteran, I would have been perfectly happy.
Is that right?
Absolutely.
But you did the police beat for a long time, so you kind of like cops too, don't you?
I love the police in Decatur and the Macon County Sheriff's Office people there, and the prosecutors and everybody in the courthouse. They adopted me as their family, and I'm still in their family.
So where you and I became friends is when you were putting together a book about people in Decatur, and you called me about maybe doing a story about J.L. Hubbard, and you and I became pretty good friends. And what was that book called?
It's called Legendary Locals of Decatur.
Oh, really? Legendary, huh? Okay, well, this man here is legendary. Funny that you and I were talking about different type of legendary people, and with December 7th coming up on Saturday, Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day is very, very special. And you're talking about Peter, and would you introduce Peter to the folks out there?
Well, Peter Frank is one of the greatest people I've ever known, in that he served in the U.S. Navy during World War II. And when I wrote my book, my main focus was on veterans, especially World War II veterans. So it's an absolute privilege to meet Peter Frank and other men and women who served. And I want to turn over my time to Peter and tell us more about himself. But he is a living legend to me, and I'm so thankful that he's still here when most World War II veterans are no longer with us.
Well, run down some of the things you know about him. I mean, he was in the Honor Guard for a long time here. He knows the importance of holding a flag properly, playing taps, right?
When almost everyone else was Korean War veterans, Vietnam veterans, or more recent veterans, Peter, for a long time. I'm saying, what was up until about a year and a half ago that you were still serving in the Honor Guard?
About a year ago.
Yeah. And Peter, we had some veterans on during Veterans Day, Vietnam vets. And it was a jaw-dropping segment. And I have such respect for you guys. And not until Saving Private Ryan, the movie, did I actually understand what you all went through in World War II. And that from that day on, my viewpoint and my honor for you guys went up immensely. And I have great respect when I see a veteran with a cap on that shows all his time in the war. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
And I was told by Walt Morey. Did you know Walt Morey?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, he served 2 tours in World War II and 1 tour in Korea. He told me that Tom Brokaw had it wrong about the Greatest Generation. It wasn't that they didn't want to talk about it. It's that no one really asked. And when you ask, you'll talk. Is that true?
That's about right. Yes, sir.
And so tell us about how far after did you go into World War II after Pearl Harbor?
I went into the service 1943. I got out in 1946.
All right, so Pearl Harbor was 1941.
Yes.
So the war was pretty much going full force by the time you got in.
It was full force when I went in there.
How old were you?
I was 18 when I went in.
Wow. Now, did you immediately want to go in, or what was your thought process?
I graduated from Decatur High School June 11th, 1943, and as soon as I graduated, I was drafted into the service. I had a choice, either Army or Navy. I chose the Navy because my kin go back to Greece, and they were all seafaring people. And I love the water. I love the ocean. I love traveling on board ship, which I did. And then I went on to Pearl Harbor from San Francisco and caught the USS Rocky Mount AGC-3, a general communications ship. And I was on her for about almost 2 years, and we made several landings in the Pacific. We started out with the Marshall Island operation, and then we went into the Marianas operation, which is a very bloody situation. And then from the Marianas, we went to Borneo, and then from Borneo, we invaded the Philippine Islands, and I landed with General MacArthur October the 20th, 1944, and he said, "I have returned." When he left the Philippine Islands to go to Australia, he said, "I shall return." True to his words, he accomplished what he wanted.
Now there were millions of U.S. soldiers in World War II, and when it was all over and done with, I read 425,000 Allied and German troops were killed in World War II. How do you feel about surviving that and being one of the survivors?
Well, I attribute my survival to God. I prayed morning, noon, and night.
Did you really? I mean, morning, noon, and night.
We prayed constantly because we were in the line of fire. Our ship was lucky because it was targeted by the Japanese due to the fact that we had communication equipment on there, and we conducted all the landing operations. We went on in about within 500 feet of the beach and watched the Marines go ashore, and we gave them instructions. And we also gave instructions to the battle wagons that were about 20 miles away from every operation. They would lob their 16-inch shells into the beaches wherever we directed them to. And
were you involved at that time when the Japanese were doing the suicide bombings with their planes?
Yes, we had suicide bombers, and they hit our aircraft carriers because they didn't want any retaliation from the aircraft that was out there. We had baby aircraft carriers because it was a quick landing and quick takeoff from those baby aircraft carriers. I went over on a USS Essex. At that time, it was the top carrier in the fleet. And after that, that's when I went to Pearl Harbor and picked up my ship. And there's a lot of aircraft carriers that got sunk because they didn't want the airplanes bothering the Japanese.
I heard the Japanese must have been incredibly fierce back then, or just their thought process of what they wanted to be as a country. But they were taking on China. They went in war with China. We put an embargo to try to stop them from the war in China. And instead of backing down, they came after us in Pearl Harbor, and we didn't back down. We went into the war at that point. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And I heard by the time these suicide bombers, there's a certain amount of them that did it for the imperial government, but they were getting to the point where they had to chain them into planes and put only enough fuel that they couldn't get back. There's only so many that wanted to do suicide flights, and they ran out of them.
That's correct.
It was pretty brutal. The Japanese were brutal back then.
They were brutal. They had no heart. They didn't care what they did to themselves as long as they accomplished their mission that they were assigned to.
And that had to scare you to death in knowing that you're in that kind of life and death situation where I find it interesting and cool that you said you prayed morning, afternoon, and night. And your faith got you through it. Was it just you, or did you do it with groups of guys? How did you pray?
Well, before we went into battle, we always had prayer service, and we prayed to God that he would see us through. Some of us got through it, some of us didn't. The real heroes are the ones that didn't get come back. And I take my hat off to the ones that were killed over there.
You spent a lot of time with the Honor Guard on days like D-Day and Veterans Day and Pearl Harbor
Yes, sir.
recognition. And I read in one of Huey's articles that you do it, be an example to the young people so they understand the importance of patriotism. Could you talk a little bit about that and why that's important for them to understand?
The Honor Guard serves a certain purpose to acknowledge the veterans that have passed on and to honor them at their time of death. And I served on it for about 15 years. I went through about 16,000 funerals, and I don't regret one bit of it. I still wished I could serve on it, but unfortunately, I'm unable to. But the Honor Guard serves a very distinct person, and we honor the families that have lost their loved ones.
Your brother Jerry also served time in the military.
Yes, my brother Jerry served, and he was a naval corpsman, and he patched up wounded Marines, and that was something else.
What message do you have for people out there listening, and what would you tell them they should do on Saturday for Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day in honor of these great, great Americans?
I would say for them to pause for an hour or so during the day or whenever and thank God for what a beautiful nation we have, and to preserve our nation, because we've got the greatest Constitution that was ever written in the history of mankind. And I believe that we should continue as we have been. And the Honor Guard is part of that, amongst other organizations also.
Awesome. Peter Frank, 94 years young, and a veteran of World War II, a great American. And Huey, I just want to thank you for introducing him to our audience.
Thanks for having him here, and thanks for having us here.
All right, folks, we'll be back with more Soy City Buzz on First Mid Monday right after this.